We're talking about the Lewis Central Archaeological Site, officially known as 13PW5 for the Smithsonian classification system for archaeology sites in the United States. I first got involved in this because when I was a kid, I used to hear about an old Indian burial ground that Lewis Central was buried on top of. And then I started working there and I thought, well, I want to figure out what there is to that. So I started doing some research and I discovered that instead of the school being built on a burial ground, when Lewis Central started to build Lewis Central Middle School in 1975, the very first week of construction, they backed over some bones at the foot of the bluff upon which Titan Hill sits today. And that's out on Harry Langdon Boulevard, just out by Tastee Treat. And as a matter of fact, the intersecting road is the east South Omaha Bridge Road that no longer connects to the South Omaha Bridge Road. And I've discovered that when the construction workers found these bones, they decided to call a coroner because they had no idea if here's a human body, let's figure out what this is. Is this a murder or not? And the coroner realized that these were bones from antiquity, and so they called the state archaeologist. And sure enough, out comes the state archaeologist, and they determined that a dig needs to happen here, an archaeological dig. So for about 2 weeks in cold November of 1975, a team of archaeologists, mainly college students, they came out and dug up these bones. One of the fascinating parts about this is that they realized these bones were 2,800 years old, making them the oldest known inhabitants of Council Bluffs area, and that it provided a template for how all archaeological digs would be handled between Native American tribes and anthropologists, archaeologists from here on out. Lewis Central became a proving ground when the Omaha tribe protested the handling of previous archaeological digs in nearby Glenwood some 6 years earlier. The archaeologists from the state of Iowa office decided that the Lewis Central site would be new and different, and what they offered was, let us study the bones for a couple of weeks, and then we will return them to whatever tribe is going to claim custody, and then they can be reinterred after that. The native tribes agreed and said, certainly we want to learn as much as we can about the people that were here, and then we want to reinter the bones with all the dignity befitting a Native American tribe. Ironically, the Omaha are probably not related at all to the people that were found at the Lewis Central burial site, because they arrived in the area roughly 1,800 years after the last traces of these people were found in western Iowa. And as a matter of fact, the 13PW5 is from what we call the late Archaic period of time, 2,800 years old, and it is the only such site within roughly 500 miles. So it is very unique, and we know nothing about these people other than what the archaeologists learned from this site. And among the things that they discovered at this site was that they were buried with some mollusks, some river mollusks, right over there from the nearby Missouri River, and a few scrapers, when I refer to scrapers, I mean stone tools that were indicative of the late Archaic period, that other people, certainly of that era, of that time frame in other parts of the country, that technology was common, and an ossuary. An ossuary is a collection of bones. In this particular one at Lewis Central, there were 25 individuals ranging in age from 3 years old to 65, roughly. And they were in varying states of array. There were some that were in bags, and we call those bundle burials. And what a bundle burial is when you have someone who dies during the year or dies, you put them in a bag to preserve them and to carry them to the location that you're going to inter them in. And those were disarticulated. When we say that, we mean that they were not in the body shape. When I say they were in a bag, I don't mean in a long duffel bag. I mean they were actually in a rather small bag, and they were bundled up where at some point the bones became disarticulated and they were put into a bag, almost like a knapsack, and slung over the shoulder. So these were likely carried around for quite some time after the people were deceased. So, and again, the joke I always make is that the job of the people to carry these dead bodies, I would like to say Aunt Sally, would likely fall to the teenagers, and they would have to carry dead Aunt Sally around for 6 months to a year until it was time to inter them in this site at 13 PW5. I can't get my 18-year-old to take out the garbage, let alone carry around a dead aunt for that period of time. And in addition to the bundle bodies, we have some that were found in the fetal position, fully articulated. That suggests, according to the archaeologists, that these were people from one tribe that split off into smaller groups during the wintertime, possibly to follow game, as many tribes have done for millennia on this continent. And when they came back together, they would bury their dead as part of a unification of the tribe, readdressing strengths and readdressing ties, maybe marrying people from different clans off to one another to reaffirm and reestablish their relationship with each other. And among these was likely the burial of all their dead from the previous year and from currently into one location, the foot of Titan Hill. So some of these slides are pretty neat. You can see Tastee Treat there in 1975. Currently, Tastee Treat is on the opposite side of the road, and where the Tastee Treat is in this picture is now the Wabash Trail parking lot. In a lot of these photos, you can see some of the archaeologists working, and you can see that the hill has been, at least for 40 years or so, unmolested up to this point. It's pure bluff. It had been touched more recently, however, as various road companies took what's called borrow and to make roads around the county and, in addition to that, the interstate. You can see some of the tools. I have some close-ups of some of these tools. Now, a couple of these things you can find. The flat plateaus that the archaeologists are digging on, it's as if they dug out and came to a flat point and they dug out a flat surface. That is called a horizon, some of the terms of the trade. And all of these are grad students except for the guy in the hat there, and that turns out that he was my anthropology professor at Iowa State. Some of the tools that you can see that they mark where bones are located, and the outline of the archaeological site. Sure enough, once that the bones were exhumed, they were taken to Iowa Western Community College for a temporary lab. And in that lab, they took what measurements they could. They inventoried all the bones. They inventoried everything that was found in the ossuary with the bones. And they returned the bones eventually to the Omaha tribe. Lewis Central, in an effort to exit any controversy before it started, and this was a period of time where AIM was big in the political climate and the popular climate, Lewis Central wanted to refrain from being part of any disputes with Native Americans. So as soon as the bones were out of the ground, they filed a motion with the state and the city to transfer the bones to the Omaha tribe. And they paid for reinterment just down the road in Lewis Township Cemetery, which the Omaha agreed to. And the irony of that is the natives took the bones of people, not their ancestors, from the school site to be buried into an American grave, and the grave was unmarked. So all the bones were buried together in an unmarked grave that I have not been able to find the location to in Lewis Township Cemetery. The person responsible for the interment has passed away, and his son either did not know or was not forthcoming about the location of the bones of the people from 13 PW5. But certain enough, they are buried in Lewis Township Cemetery. Part of the redesign of East-South Omaha Bridge Road, after an accident that occurred there when there was a bridge, it was decided that the bridge would be taken out and then the railroad also be taken out. And in its place, Tastee Treat tore down their building, and they moved across the street right at the foot of Titan Hill and made an entirely new building up to date with more than one cheeseburger. They've done quite well at the foot of Titan Hill and right across the street from the 13 PW5 burial. Now, it's interesting to note that there were some road studies done since 13 PW5 was excavated in 1975, and the state archaeological team and the road study both recommended that further study be done along that roadway, and that likely there are more human remains to be found from the people of that time period. And as of yet, nothing has been done. The state archaeological team claimed that they had very little time, were pressured from every side to get done, and they were working in really tough conditions in the middle of January in frozen ground on a bluff on a school, while Lewis Central was pressuring them to get moving so they could resume construction of the Lewis Central Middle School. They said it was a rush job. There are currently no remains at all held by the state archaeologist's office to be tested to find out what their genetic makeup is or whom they might be related to. So the only hope of finding out truly who these people were is finding some more bones from the same location. Well, the best way to do that would be some of the new advances in archaeology that was not around when 13 PW5 occurred are LIDAR, which is laser and radar mapping, in which you can take a LIDAR system and go over the ground either by a drone, by airplane, or if it's a very localized position, by a little box on a lawnmower, and go over there, and it pounces laser waves off the into the ground, and it'll receive them on the way back after it hits a harder surface, and you can tell if there are bones or anything else in there, and that gives you an idea of where to dig, if you find anything, where to dig. Certainly, I would like to see a LIDAR on a drone fly over near that location and see if that would be possible to find some more remains.
History is never truly lost until it's forgotten, and preserving that history is our mission.